2 p.m. I would like to bring the Clean Energy Alliance board meeting for July 16th to order. Board Secretary, will you please call roll?
Board Member Becker?
Present.
Vice Chair Haviland?
Present.
Chair Schumacher?
Present. Seeing that we are all present, I will ask Vice Chair Haviland to please lead us in the salute to our flag.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And then I will ask, heading into public comment, if there are any comments for the public comment section.
No public comments.
Okay, any board comments or announcements? And no presentations. We will head into the approval of the minutes. Do we have any minutes to approve? I don't believe we do. Not this time. And then we'll go into item 1. So item 1 is being placed in front of the consent calendar today because we are going to be electing the board chair and the vice chair for the fiscal year 2020-2021. So with that, Barb, did you want to kick this off? Or do you want us just to go right into discussion?
You can go right into discussion.
Right into discussion. So it has been an absolute joy to serve as the board chair. If my colleagues would like to initiate a round robin sort of chair position, meaning that the chair would then shift and the vice chair would shift up, I'd be okay with that. Otherwise, I'd be happy to continue to serve as your chair for the next year. But I'm going to leave that up to you.
I think it might be a good idea if we since there's just 3 cities, do you think it would be a good idea to just automatically rotate cities every year and not have to, officially nominate and just have it rotate like we do in our city? We rotate mayor every year. It's just automatically the next one moves up. So I feel like with a small group of us, I think that might be the best solution. Does that sound like an option?
So I'm fine with the intent of that, but I think it's good to have the formal process of nominating every year.
Right.
We have the same ritual in our city of the deputy mayor becomes the mayor, and that's always been the tradition, but we still have the formal process of nominating and electing. And I think that's a good process to keep in place.
Yes, I do agree with that. I just thought that it should just sort of rotate as opposed to just staying with one city each year type of a thing.
Perfect. So I would like to nominate Vice Chair Haviland for the position of chair. And then I would also like to nominate Ms. Becker as the new vice chair.
I just want to ask one little question. I wasn't sure. There was sort of some rumors out there that Ellie, you might not be running for re-election, and I didn't know if that posed any difficulties. And I don't want to put you on the spot. You don't need to announce here. But I just, if that's the case, then I would really like to have Solana Beach be the next in rotation, since it might be uncertain.
Yeah, so I have not made that decision, and so I don't want to put the CEA in a position where they nominate a chair who then isn't going to be here after December. So because I'm not ready to formally make an announcement one way or the other, I'm perfectly fine skipping the rotation for this year. I'm also perfectly fine continuing with our current with Corey as chair and me as vice chair. So I totally understand your concern. And if that means you want to do something a little different this year, I don't have a problem with that.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that. I just,
right.
I just,
the frequent question lately, and I do need to make a decision.
Yeah.
So I think there's value in the city rather than the individual being the focus. So it's not necessarily that it is Ellie who takes the position if we're going to rotate, but it is the city of Del Mar. And so regardless of what happens for any individual board member, it is truly the city that is the holder of the seat. And this is going to be true for all of us as we go into annual. So, for instance, if I, for instance, in January am replaced as the CEA representative for Carlsbad, that shouldn't disrupt the rotation because it's the actual city that occupies the seat, not the individual. So I just wanted to present that as a little bit of a different way of thinking about this, that it would be the city of Del Mar that takes the chair position rather than the particular individual who occupies that.
I think that's a fair point. I think that's a really good point. I think, though, that since we're the three of us, we're the ones that, or the ones that started this, I just think it's probably, I don't know why it wouldn't make sense to rotate to Solana Beach, since I will be here for the entire time with certainty. And I guess I'm just throwing it out there that it just seems more to have the certainty of someone who can continue on with the chair position.
Well, if there's any concern about my level of commitment to CEA or my position on council, whether I run or not, I'm 100% committed to serving my term with my best effort.
Appreciate that.
So I did make a motion to have the city of Del Mar take the chair's position and the city of Solana Beach to take the vice chair position in this round. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. We'll go ahead and call for the roll.
Board Member Becker,
No.
Vice Chair Haviland,
Yes.
Chair Schumacher.
Yes. And with that, 2-1 vote, I will go ahead and hand the figurative gavel over to Chair Haviland, and you will be, I believe, chairing the rest of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you so much.
Chair Haviland.
Yes.
Sorry, this is Clem Brown with the City of Del Mar. We're having a problem with the feed. I was just informed by Del Mar TV. Can we pause the meeting for a second and get that worked out, and then we can resume?
Of course.
Thank you.
Just let me know when we're ready to resume.
I will. Thank you.
Oh.
Also, I'll just put in my pitch right now, Chair Haviland, you're not allowed to leave public service ever. This is my 2 cents.
I appreciate that.
All right, we are ready to resume. We're back online.
Great. Thank you so much, Clem. The next agenda item is the consent calendar. And before we move on to that, I just want to say thank you so much to Board Member Schumacher for being an excellent chair and getting the Clean Energy Alliance off to a great start. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And so moving on to the consent calendar, we have 2 items on consent. Are there board members who wish to add or remove, who wish to remove an item from the consent calendar?
Chair Haviland? I do.
Yes.
I would like to pull item number 3.
All right. And seeing no other hands, I'm going to, so we have 1 item on the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I would second.
All right. Sarah, if you could please call the roll.
Board Member Schumacher,
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker,
Yes.
Chair Haviland.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So item number 3, Administrative, Operational, and Regulatory Affairs Update. Ms. Boswell, are you going to take the lead on that one?
Yes, I have an update for you with regards to the Clean Energy Alliance launch that I would like to provide. And then also, if the board, if it pleases the board, I'd like to have Mr. Tosdahl provide an update to the board on another item from the regulatory update. So as you're aware, Clean Energy Alliance has been working towards its launch in May of 2021. And San Diego Gas and Electric has also been working diligently towards that goal. During the same time that we've been working on our implementation or our launch, they've been working on their Customer Information System Replacement Program, also known as Envision. And it's a project of theirs that's been going on for many years, and they've been committed to and on track for a January 4th, 2021 launch, which has not been an easy feat. There's been challenges with regards to the COVID-19 environment and changes to work environment. But despite that, they've stayed on track for that go-live date, which has also resulted in their commitment to Clean Energy Alliance in their May 2021 launch. On Friday, July 10th, CEA staff, as well as consultants and staff from San Diego Community Power, participated in a meeting with San Diego Gas and Electric, where they provided an update with regards to the impacts of a recent CPUC decision related to customer disconnections. And in that meeting, SDG&E indicated that should that decision be required to be implemented by SDG&E in April 2021, as had been directed, that it could result in their Envision project being delayed till April 2021 and would result in a potential impact to our launch schedule. SDG&E had submitted a letter to the CPUC requesting the PUC to consider extending the implementation of the decision to September 2021, which would then provide the ability for SDG&E to remain on their current schedule. We did learn today that the PUC did deny that request of SDG&E. We did receive communication from SDG&E earlier today that informed us of the denial by the CPUC, but did indicate that they are continuing to work towards their June 4th, 2021 implementation, and that they will be getting back with us with regards to any potential changes to our schedule. As you're aware, we've been relying on the May 2021 commitment from SDG&E. We've made regulatory compliance filings with that date, as has SDG&E with regards to the assumption of the customers moving from SDG&E service to Clean Energy Alliance service in May 2021. We've initiated solicitations for resource adequacy procurements and also our long-term renewable solicitation, again with this assumed launch date. With this recent news from SDG&E, it is concerning. We would, up to this point, SDG&E has been firm in their commitment to supporting the launch, and throughout the proceeding related to the disconnects had not indicated that proceeding could put our launch date in question. And so we've had good reason to rely on SDG&E's commitment to our May 2021 launch. I would recommend that we consider a formal written communication to SDG&E requesting that they continue to be committed to our launch schedule and that they work towards that as they have been in the past. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I will say that we do have staff from SDG&E, Ms. Scanlon and Mr. Kreider, available for the board should you have questions of them.
Okay, questions? Yeah, again, it'd be easier to raise your hand. When I put the participant screen up, I then lose visibility to your camera. So, Board Member Schumacher.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the update, Ms. Boswell. Would you recommend, as I assume that the San Diego Community Power is going through the same experience, would it be your recommendation that a formal letter be coordinated with that agency?
Thank you for that question. And yes, I do think that a joint communication from both CCAs would be in order. I also think since Solana Energy Alliance is the operating CCA and also is impacted as a result of the potential delays, because it has been assumed that Solana Energy Alliance would be transitioning, that it also be jointly including Solana Energy Alliance as well if the board decides that's the right direction to go.
Thank you.
Yes. Place or you lose it. So what do you know the last day that SDG&E would have to decide whether or not they're launching in January? Can we get a certainty from that? And maybe this is a question for Ms. Scanlon, unless you know, or Mr. Kreider.
I don't have the answer, and I would defer to SDG&E staff for that question.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Barbara. Board members, my name is Scott Kreider. I'm the Vice President of Customer Services at SDG&E, and I'm also the executive sponsor and have been personally involved in leading our Envision program really since its inception back in 2016. So let me first start by saying that none of us want to experience delays. We selected January 2021 more than 3 years ago. And I'm very proud to say that as we sit here today, 6 months before we're supposed to deploy the system, despite COVID, despite having our entire staff having to work remote, that we remained on schedule and we're very prepared to go forward with January. We recognize, part of our desire to ensure that we remain on schedule is because we've always said that we want to be good partners with both JPAs, and we want to make sure that you've got a very, very successful launch and make sure that our joint customers are effectively served and reliably served from a billing and customer service perspective. So we are equally disappointed with this recent development because we're training 1,500 people right now. We're really ready to go. But unfortunately, the decision is very expansive and very complex. And so we looked at a number of different options to really make sure that we could stay on schedule. And as Barbara, I think, mentioned, we did make the request to the Commission to really delay these new decision requirements so we could keep our January date and make sure that both JPAs could have an effective transition per the schedule that we've been working very closely and very collaboratively with both JPAs on. And so in kind of direct response to your question, we are going to need to make a decision here in a matter of days. So, this is both SDG&E and, I'd also presume that, the JPA's certainty is really important at this point. We've all made, substantial commitments, for us and our ratepayers. A delay could add $20 to $30 million, and changing a date of a program of this magnitude is very complex and it's very material and very impactful. We've actually done a detailed plan for this transition date for us in January for over a year. So changing this date is very significant to us. And again, we recognize the impacts on you as well. So unfortunately, with the Public Utilities Commission denial of our request yesterday, we haven't closed the door on exploring options, but our options are very limited at this point. So, I've asked the team to continue to look to see if there's anything else, either procedurally or otherwise, that we could pursue in order to retain our original date. And, but like I said, we're probably sometime next week need to make a firm decision, because for us to have to move the date is quite substantial. And we will continue to work with Barbara and the rest of the staff, as we kind of go through this decision process and make sure that you're aware of our thinking before we finalize anything. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
So I'm curious also, then it sounds like that is not a good way for you to go to delay. It sounds like that's the worst option. So would it be a better option for you guys to work on what your requirements were from the PUC? Would that be a better way to go? And why is that so difficult to, I don't know if you can tell me why it's so difficult for SDG&E to do that at this point.
Yeah, so it's a very good question. And so, the decision requirements, there's a lot of little things in there in terms of how we manage customer disconnections. And then there's a couple of very substantial, complex new programs that we need to offer customers. Namely, there's one that's really a debt forgiveness program for our low-income customers that has a very, behind the scenes, the billing system is incredibly complex. And so it will take us a couple of months to actually build. And because we're so far into, we've already built the new billing system, we're so far into testing now, there's no chance for us to be able to kind of reopen everything up, build all this new functionality and all this new computer code that needs to put in, and continue our testing in order for us to be able to meet our January date. And so that's why we had gone to the Commission and said, hey, let's try to delay the decision requirements a little later in 2021. And again, that would keep us on schedule, keep the CCAs on schedule, and and then we'd be able to do the rest of these decision requirements a little bit later in the year. So it was, but it is, that was the first option we looked at. It's like, okay, can we fit all this new stuff that we need to build?
Can you have two separate systems then for a while until you can?
No, unfortunately, once you turn the switch, the old system is not usable anymore. So, and just to give you a little bit of context, utilities do this once in a generation. These systems, this is a $300 million program. And we will be replacing all of our billing system, all of our customer service software, all of the website that our customers use to pay their bill, all the mobile applications, all of the ways that we communicate with customers. So the deployment of a system of this size actually takes about 4 days, and so this is a very, very complex, and probably one of the most complex IT undertakings that a utility can actually do, which is why we haven't done one in 25 years.
And is it possible for the JPA's San Diego Clean Power and CEA to launch on the old system, or is that out of the question?
No, unfortunately, we can't. We spent a lot of time. We spent almost a year just getting Solana Beach CCA kind of up and running, and all that code that needed to be built, and it's working very well. But the system is so old that at scale, we would not be able to transition all the customers on the old system, and then at the same time have to make a switch over, which is why the January date was so important and why we felt comfortable, really, as we collaborated with staff on your transition dates, why we felt like this was a really, really good plan, and quite frankly, we were right on track.
Okay. And Ms. Boswell, if worst case scenario happens and we're not able to launch on schedule, what's the next most realistic date for us to look at for a launch?
So we would want to evaluate options based on a postponement, take a look at updating the financial pro forma, which really does inform the decision with regards to what the next best option would be. I would hesitate to put a specific date out there, but based on my experience in other utilities, we would likely be looking at a fall implementation. But I'd like to come back to the board with specific analysis in order to present options. And
of course, SDG&E we are going to, if and when a decision is made that the date has to move, we will, of course, be working side by side. And I've asked my team to start thinking now. It's like, what are the creative ideas that we can come up with to really limit the impacts? And so, we would go live in early April. And it's like, well, what can we do working collaboratively with the JPA to try to limit that impact, while at the same time making sure that we don't move so fast that we create a risk of a mistake, because with these systems, given their complexity and the far-reaching impacts, it touches every single one of our customers. It's essentially our whole operations is just making sure that we're managing the risk and making sure that when bills go out the door, that we've got confidence that they're going out on time and accurate. We've got an ability to process, and that transition is going to go very, very smoothly. It's important to you. It's absolutely important to us, and we stand 100% committed to being a very, very good partner with you guys.
Not getting off on the right foot here. Honestly, you talked about the money that you're going to lose. The money that the CEA loses is substantial too. The CCAs start in the summer for a reason. I think you realize that. So I really, really would like to have you consider, not moving that date from January. So
I understand.
Yeah, and I just wanted to double down and support Vice Chair Becker's comments, and secondarily, just emphasize that 25 years ago, the tech wasn't in place to do this type of a transition. I think we can all recognize that. I would like to support and move the recommendation of Ms. Boswell to authorize the chair to write a formal letter with SDCP and Solana Clean Energy if those two JPAs would like to join, or if Solana Clean Energy and SDCP would like to join in the formal letter that Ms. Boswell was recommending.
I would second that motion.
Board Member Schumacher?
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker?
Yes.
Chair Haviland?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that update. And I guess the only good news out of this is that we all seem to have the same financial incentive, which is to keep this on track. So I really hope we get some good news next week. All right. Any other questions or comments on this agenda item before we move on to the regulatory affairs update? Yes, Ms. Boswell.
Vice Chair Becker had her hand up for me. Chair.
Oh,
Yes.
so there was some other questions I had on that. I wanted to hear a little bit more if there was anything more on a possible new partner, the San Clemente. Somebody, I thought, I don't have it in front of me anymore, but I thought there was some movement with San Clemente. You've been talking to them and wondering if they had a feasibility study done and things like that.
But thank you, Vice Chair Becker. I did have a conversation, not with staff at San Clemente, but with an interested, active community member that has participated in some of the Orange County workshops that they've had evaluating the feasibility of bringing community choice aggregation to Orange County. I had a long conversation with this community member and did let him know that the Clean Energy Alliance Board was very interested in expanding into the Orange County areas that are within the San Diego Gas and Electric territory, and that had actually assigned a board liaison and would be happy to set up a meeting with elected officials or appropriate members in San Clemente. And I have yet to hear back on that offer.
Okay, great. That sounds good. Thank you. I also think in item 3 was Ty's regulatory update. Is that correct too? So
Yes, if Ms. Boswell, if you are finished, I think we can move on to the regulatory update. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Haviland. Can everybody hear me okay?
yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just want to make sure I'm not talking to myself here. Appreciate it. I have a very important item that I want to discuss with all of you. So I'm not going to go over all the items in my regulatory report unless you have specific questions, in which case I'm happy to answer them. I do want to address, I actually want to address 2 items, but one is critical. SDG&E has filed a new application called a PCIA trigger application. It was just filed this past Friday, and we've been reviewing it this week and discussing it. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time describing it. It is, again, I think when I get to the end of the discussion, everyone will agree that it is important. Under new rules issued by the Public Utilities Commission at the end of 2018, SDG&E filed what's called a PCIA trigger application this past Friday that would substantially increase the PCIA for existing CCA customers, meaning Solana Beach customers, and reduce the generation rates for bundled customers that receive service from SDG&E. Specifically, SDG&E is requesting that the Commission authorize an increase of PCIA rates by a total of $8.92 million and a simultaneous refund to bundled customers of the same amount over the course of a 3-month period at the end of this year, at the end of 2020. The effect of this proposal impacts customers very differently, depending on whether they receive service from the utility or a CCA program or direct access provider. Bundled customers in the residential class would see a reduction of their bill of less than $1 per month. Departing load customers with a 2015 vintage would see an increase of $187 per month. And so these impacts are driven in part by the fact that the number of bundled customers is relatively large relative to the departing load customers. So $8 million is or almost $9 million is spread across more customers. This proposal, if it's adopted, would affect Solana Beach CCA program customers, but it is the first time the utility is making a proposal of this kind under the rules that were established in the 2018 decision that I referenced earlier, which is D1810019. And there's concern among the CCA community statewide that this approach will be employed by other utilities, PG&E and Southern California Edison. And so while this issue does not affect CEA right now at the moment, if SDG&E were to employ a similar approach in the future when CEA is fully operational, we could see these sort of volatile, large swings in the PCIA rate. And so because of that, we've been having discussions. Ms. Boswell and I have been having discussions with the statewide organization, CalCCA. They are analyzing the issues and looking into taking action on this application. We've also been discussing the issues with Solana Energy Alliance and with San Diego Community Power. They are doing the same. I do want to stress at this point in time that this is a proposal from SDG&E and not a decision that's been adopted by the commission. Nevertheless, it is on a fast track. SDG&E is requesting its decision within 60 days of the filing date, which is a very short time period for a commission decision. The filing date was July 10, so we'd be looking at a decision on or around September 10. We have various options that we can pursue at the Public Utilities Commission to challenge this proposal, and for various reasons, a discussion about those options is best held in closed session. So I understand the board has a special meeting scheduled for next week, and I would recommend that a closed session item be added to that agenda in order to entertain some further discussion and talk about next steps. So I want to stop there. I have one other item that I do want to discuss, but I want to stop there and answer any questions that you might have about that application.
Questions?
With the, thank you, Mr. Tosdahl, and Ms. Haviland, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
With the trigger application filed, just for some clarity, this is the first time that an application like this has been filed in the state under the 2018 ruling, correct?
Under those rules, taking this approach, yes, correct. So the concern, Ms. Schumacher, is that if this proposal were adopted, it would be precedential. It would set a precedent for the commission that could be followed by SDG&E in future years or by the other utilities across the state.
And if I'm to understand this correctly, the most immediate impact would be to Solana Clean Energy.
That's absolutely right.
As well as our specific JPA.
That's correct. But the most immediate impact, would be to Solana Beach customers. Sure. Certainly, in terms of the near term.
I'll go ahead and leave my comments there before I start editorializing. Thank you. I would support a closed session item on this.
Thank you.
Is that a motion? Move to add this to the closed session?
I'd be pleased to make that a motion, yes.
All right, I'll second that. Before we vote on that, Ms. Becker, did you have questions or comments on this?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay.
I will save my comments as well.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. Ms. Haviland, if I may, the other item I wanted to discuss, I also am going to recommend that we address in closed session, so perhaps I should address it before the vote. I'm happy to address it afterward.
Sure.
The other item we have discussed a little bit, SDG&E and the other utilities in the state file a regular application called an ERA application, the Energy Resource and Recovery Account application. This is a proceeding that is related to the issues we were just discussing. It is where the PCIA is set and major changes to SDG&E's generation rates are also considered. Given this trigger application and the issues that typically arise in the ERA applications and are included in SDG&E's current application, I would also recommend that we include that in our closed session discussion at the special meeting, and since this is a closely related issue, and again, have some further discussion and discuss next steps. Thank you.
Board Member Schumacher, are you all right amending your motion to include the ERA application as part of the closed session?
I certainly am. I just want to check in with our legal counsel to see whether or not these items are ripe for review in closed session.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry. I will be reviewing the closed session basis with Mr. Tosdale after our meeting today. So we're hoping we could find a basis to do that. And I will need to develop a few more facts as to our legal justification.
Okay, so then I would just make my motion contingent on legal counsel review.
Vice Chair Becker, are you okay with the amended? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Kreider, could you please call the vote?
Absolutely. Board Member Schumacher,
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker,
Yes.
Chair Haviland.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, other regulatory updates before we continue on with our agenda?
Thank you, Ms. Haviland. I understand you have a very packed agenda today. I'm happy to answer specific questions about other proceedings. I was planning on addressing these two items and these two items only, but again, free to answer questions as the board wishes.
All right, do any of the board members have any additional questions on this agenda item? Nope, seeing no hands raised. All right. Do we need a motion to approve this item, or since it's information only, can we just move on to the next item?
This was really intended just to be received as reports, so there's no need for any action on those two items.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on to item 4, the Clean Energy Alliance draft financial pro formas. Ms. Boswell, are you introducing that?
Thank you, Chair Haviland. Yes, I am. And one moment so I can set up the presentation and share my screen. Okay, are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. The item that's before you at this time is an informational item that reviews the Clean Energy Alliance financial performance. As you may recall, our technical advisors, specific energy advisors, do prepare the financial performance, and we do have John DeLussy from Pacific Energy Advisors available to answer questions. This is the recommendation is this is an informational item on the Clean Energy Alliance pro formas. At board direction, we have been continuing to evaluate 3 energy mix scenarios with regards to the financial pro formas. We have a base scenario, which is assumes a 50% renewable default energy product that increases to 100% renewable energy by 2035. The renewable energy is sourced from approximately 82% portfolio content category 1, which is in-state, generally in-state renewable energy, and 18% PCC2, which is the mix that is allowable by state. At the board direction, we also are continuing to evaluate a second option, option 1, which would be 100% of the renewable energy coming from the portfolio content category 1 at launch, which does come with an increased power cost of approximately $1 million cumulative by 2025, which is the timeline with which we focus our pro forma on. We have an option 2, which we've also been tracking and evaluating, which is ramping up to PCC1 by fiscal year 2023, which brings with it an increased power cost of approximately $760,000 cumulative by 2025. Each of these scenarios are modeled at 3 different rate assumptions. One is at rate parity with regards to SDG&E generation rates and costs for customers. The second assumption is providing customers with a 1% discount on their generation. And the third is achieving the stated goal in the JPA of providing a 2% discount on generation costs. Each 1% rate discount is approximately $1 million in cost per year to Clean Energy Alliance, or a cumulative $4.3 million through 2025. And as we review the performers, it's important to keep in mind that these reflect our best information available today, and that information is subject to change and will change as we move towards our launch in May of 2021. So with that, I will move through the 9 total proformas, and happy to answer questions as we move through, or wait till the end at the board's pleasure. So the first scenario for review is our base scenario, and which is at rate parity. And again, the base reflects the mix of the portfolio category 1 at 82% and portfolio category 2 source renewable energy at 50%. As you can see here on line 6, we have positive net surplus in each of our operating years, and achieve our 5% contribution to reserves annually, and achieve 20% operating reserve by fiscal year 2025 under this scenario. With that same base assumption with regards to our energy mix and providing a 1% discount to customers in our fiscal year 2021, and this year really only represents 2 months of activity. We are launching in May 2021, and our fiscal year does end in June 2021. We do miss our 5% goal of a reserve contribution, but do have 3.8% of available funds to contribute into our operating reserve. However, it is made up in subsequent years, and we achieve a 20% reserve by 2025. And you do see that we do have, over and above the operating reserve, a net surplus that would be available for the board as discretion to either contribute additional funds into the operating reserve or to use for other programs or discounts as the board desires. And then the same assumptions with regards to our product mix, energy product. With a 2% discount, our reserve contribution in the first fiscal year is 2.4%. In the following fiscal year, which is our first full fiscal year, is 4.5%. And then in subsequent years, we are able to contribute the full 5% to the operating reserve with a net surplus each year for other discretionary items. And we achieve a 19.2% cumulative operating reserve by 2025. Taking those same rate assumptions and looking at our option 1, which is the 100% PCC1 at launch. In our first fiscal year, we are contributing just shy of our 5% goal, 4.9% into the operating reserve. And each subsequent year, we can contribute the full 5%, and we have a net surplus available, and we have a cumulative net operating reserve of 19.8%. So just about hitting 20% by 2025. This option 1 of 100% PCC1 at launch and providing customers a 1% rate discount. We see our operating reserve contribution in the first fiscal year at 3.6% and achieve our 20% operating reserve by 2025. And then with the same mix of energy and also providing the 2% discount to customers, we see a 2.1% reserve contribution in 2021. a 4.2% reserve contribution in 2022, and then are able to achieve our full 5% in subsequent years. And we also have net surplus from operations beginning in fiscal year 2023. And then evaluating our option 2, which is achieving 100% PCC1 by 2023. Our costs are the same and revenues are the same in the first fiscal year. So we are able to achieve our 5% operating reserve in each year, and also would have a subsequent net surplus available for priorities that the board may identify. With option 2 and offering customers a 1% discount. Again, our year 1 is the same with our full 5% contributions in each year. And we achieve 20% operating reserve by 2025. And we do see it result a net surplus. And the last option is our option 2 with a 2% discount. We have a 3.8% operating reserve in 2021. That grows to 4.4% operating reserve contribution in the second year, or the first full year of operation, and achieve a 19.2% cumulative operating reserve by fiscal year 2025. And we do have a net surplus available beginning in fiscal year 2023 to address priorities that the board may identify. That does complete my presentation, and we do have John DeLussy available for questions that the board may have, and I'm happy to answer questions as well.
Thank you for that. Are there questions from the board? Board Member Schumacher.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the opportunity to really dig into these in a more focused way. As we were going through, there was one thing that for whatever reason I hadn't picked up on before, but all of our pro formas have a 50% renewable product only. And
yes.
Our goal is 100% renewable by 2035.
Yes. The 50% is where we start, and we do incrementally increase it to reach our goal by 2035. So it does grow in a straight line to achieve 100% by 2035.
So I'm going to am I remembering correctly that the board wanted to know some comparisons between 50%, 75%, 1%? The renewable mix? Was that a part of the conversation that we had, or was it just around base and then the PCC1 option at launch and PCC1 by 2023? I thought we also wanted to know a little bit more about some of the different options that we had in front of us for percentage of renewables. Am I not remembering that correctly?
You are. My understanding is that those other two options would come at a additional cost to the residents or to the cities who opted to have a higher default. So the 50% renewable would be Clean Energy Alliance's default at those rate discounts, and we would offer a 75% or a 100% option, but that would come at an additional premium cost to cover that incremental increase, which is why it's not modeled, because it would have a premium, and we have yet to determine what that would be, but that it would cover the cost of that additional increase.
Okay, thanks for explaining that to me, Ms. Boswell. I appreciate that. With looking at the option 2, one of the things that am I correct in thinking that option 2, for instance, or even option 1, would drive the local energy generation market?
I'm going to ask Mr. DeLussy to assist with that response with regards to the impact it could have on local generation.
Hi, this is John DeLussy. So I think any of the options, quite frankly, could help drive local renewable development, because even under the base, the vast majority of the renewable energy is PCC1. So that's more or less by definition within state, and it could also, be targeted for local resources. With option 2, you do achieve some savings, say relative to option 1, right? So I guess one way to think about this is by using some PCC2, you create some additional savings that could be used to further promote local resources. That's something to consider. But since I think in any of these options, since the vast majority is PCC1, you could really target local resources. Now, to the extent those local resources come at a higher cost than, say, renewable resources located somewhere else in the state, then it could be beneficial to allow some PCC2 to create a little bit of cost savings relative to, say, an all PCC1 portfolio.
And then the option 2 essentially sends out, I'm thinking about this just from a holistic point of view, but option 2 with a time in the future that the Clean Energy Alliance would state that it was looking to transition to just all PCC1 category, that it sends a signal that that we're looking to, that there's time between our transition and the expected purchasing of power to PCC1, rather than launching and possibly having the higher cost because there's a lower supply.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you for helping me think through that. I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Vice Chair Becker, did you have any questions on this?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for this detailed information. It's very helpful to stay up to date on how these various regulatory and operational decisions are impacting our pro forma. So I really appreciate seeing how that moves over time, given when our circumstances change. All right, so that was a receive information item only. So we can now move on to item 5. The clean energy.
Sorry, Chair.
Sure.
Before we move on, I want to take this opportunity to advocate for and to express my preference for option 2 with a 2% discount, if possible. So we're not making any decisions today, but just in all transparency and to just encourage thinking about things the way that we think about things. I have a preference for transparency and hearing how other people think rather than dragging things on. So I would love to express to you and to Vice Chair Becker that the most enticing option for me at this point is the option 2 with a 2% discount. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, item 5, the Clean Energy Alliance Community Advisory Committee policy approval.
Thank you, Board Chair Haviland, and I will prepare my screen to share. One moment. Okay, the item before the board for consideration at this time is the Clean Energy Alliance Community Advisory Committee. The recommendation is for the board to consider approval of the Community Advisory Committee policy and to review and approve the proposed timeline for implementing the Community Advisory Committee. This item was before the board for initial discussion and consideration at its June 18th, 2020 board meeting. The board did review and provide input into the policy that had been proposed at that time. Included in the requests were to change the name from Citizen Advisory Committee to Community Advisory Committee, to add a 2-year term limit to the committee members, to revise the background and expertise criteria, to clarify attendance requirements, and to revise the Community Advisory Committee purpose and objectives. And also there was a request to propose a timeline for implementing the Community Advisory Committee. The timeline as proposed would kick off August 3rd, 2020, with opening up the applications to the community for consideration. The board would then initiate or consider the initial CAC work plan and meeting schedule, which was directed by the board, that the board develop the work plan and also the meeting schedule for the CAC. And that is proposed to occur at the board meeting of August the 20th. Applications would be due to the CEA board secretary August 28th and would be provided to the board members by September 4th for review. The review and evaluation by the board members would occur between the period of September 7th through October 2nd, with then the board members bringing their recommendations forward for the full board for consideration and approval at its meeting October 15th, with the first meeting of the Community Advisory Committee to occur in either November or December 2020. This timeline assumes that one of the work plan items would be for customer outreach and marketing, and this timeline would seat the CAC in a timely manner to be able to address outreach and marketing in support of our May 2021 launch. And with that, I will turn it back to the chair. I'm available to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Questions about the proposed policy or comments? Yes, Vice Chair Becker.
Yes, I'm curious when we thought we would be putting together the work plan, the CEA work plan for this advisory committee.
As outlined in the timeline, it would be before the board at its meeting in August in order to have the work plan completed for the advisory committee, seating of the advisory committee.
Got it. Okay. I don't have any more questions, but I guess I do have some comments, but I can wait till we're there.
Okay. I don't have any questions. Board Member Schumacher, did you have questions before we move on?
No, thank you, Chair Haviland.
Okay. Oh, and I realized I've been remiss. Public comment. Do we have public comment on this agenda item? And I hope I haven't missed any for the past items.
You have not missed any public comment, and there is no public comment on this agenda item.
Thank you. All right. Vice Chair Becker, did you want to share your comment?
Sure, I can start out. I am definitely in favor of this policy, and I appreciate that you have worked out this timeline. But in light of what we've been hearing the past week, what's going on with maybe there might be some delays, and there's so much uncertainty right now, I really don't want to approve this timeline. I don't think that we need to do this quick. I would prefer to have a work plan in place. I also don't think that it's justified the cost right now to have staff be doing this. I think that it's not necessary. As far as the customer outreach and marketing that you were talking about, I'm wondering if we could propose to our own climate action commissions. I think all of the cities have that they can do some public outreach to their own cities, because I think there might be some differences in each cities, and so it could be accomplished in that way. I just don't see the need to be spending money right now if we just don't know when we're starting, and to me, there seems a lot of uncertainty. So I would adopt the policy, but I'm not willing to adopt that timeline, if that's a possibility.
Okay, Board Member Schumacher?
I want to acknowledge and respect Vice Chair Becker's hesitancy around this item or the uncertainty of the moment. However, I see great amount of value in this, and whether or not we launch in May or we launch in October, the difference is a matter of months. And so I remain fully supportive of this policy, and I appreciate the timeline that has been crafted.
All right, thank you for that. Ms. Boswell, obviously we're all concerned about cost, and is this a big work item for staff? I thought we had already discussed quite a bit of what was going to go in to the work plan, but I could be remembering that wrong. So could you give us an idea of what sort of cost or what sort of work it would mean to staff in order to keep to this timeline?
Thank you, Chair Haviland. Yes, the board did provide input into an initial work plan that I think it provides a good starting point for board discussion. The fiscal impact in the staff report really is more related to supporting the advisory committee once it's up and running, having staff support the committee at meetings and preparation of agendas, posting of agendas, that type of work effort. And that was estimated, assuming for each meeting approximately $2,500, approximately for each meeting. And as the board had outlined, the committee would be meeting quarterly, as what the board had initially indicated as an initial schedule, pending board adjustment, potential additional meetings.
Okay, thank you for that. So I do want to be sensitive to that, and I don't want to move this forward until we're ready to do so. But given that we are moving everything else to a May launch, and we don't have a reason to discontinue that path right now, I think this is a very important piece of that May launch schedule. And so since we're still on that track, I would be supportive of approving the policy today and approving the schedule today, but knowing that if we have to adjust to any schedule changes to our launch date, then certainly this and other things are going to have to be reevaluated as well. So I think for what we know today, this is an appropriate schedule, but obviously that I'm willing to modify down the road if it turns out that we have different target dates that we're shooting for. I think this is really important to a successful launch in having that connection to our community. And I think it's really important to have that at our board level. But I also agree that using our climate committees at our various cities is also an important piece to this, but I think the two of them should be working in concert and not one taking over the responsibility of the other. So I would be supportive of the staff recommendation for both the policy and the timeline at this point.
I'm wondering if I can just make a friendly suggestion that would it be too much to ask that we move it at least till the next meeting so that we have a little bit more certainty, because these things are supposed to start August 3rd. And so I'm just wondering if we could postpone it 1 month at least, and we would know at least about the launch date. Because we're going to have to change the whole thing next month anyway if something changes.
Chair Haviland?
Yeah. Oh, yes, of course.
The way that I'm thinking about this, and I just want to share the way I'm thinking about this, is that it's a work product that if we agree that this is a work product that we want to get done, if it gets done early and we are launching in October, for instance, then the work product is done either for a May launch or for a later launch. And so if we're as a board going to agree that the value of the work product is something that we all agree upon, I don't know that moving this to a different meeting is something that I want to die on the hill for. So if it's more comfortable for Vice Chair Becker to move this item to July 23rd, our next meeting, just to see where we're at with SDG&E, I would certainly be willing to do that if that would make this more comfortable. Because it just seems to me that it's a work product that I think we if we can all agree that the work product needs to get done through the committee, then whether it launches or whether we agree to it today or agree to it July 23rd, it's just something that I want to make sure that we've got good solid support on. So I'll leave it there.
Is there any hesitation in approving the policy at this meeting and then looking at the schedule at our meeting next week?
Yeah, that's what I would propose.
Okay.
So I would, if you'd like, I would move the staff recommendation to approve the policy, and then request that staff bring back the timeline to our July 23rd meeting.
I'll say.
Board Member Schumacher,
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker,
Yes.
Chair Haviland.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our next item is the Clean Energy Alliance Inclusive and Sustainable Workforce Policy.
Thank you, Chair Haviland. And one moment while I prepare my screen for sharing here. Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. So the item before the board for consideration is the Clean Energy Alliance Inclusive and Sustainable Workforce Policy. This policy recommendation is for the board to review, provide any additional input, and approve the CEA Inclusive and Sustainable Workforce Policy. And this is an item that has been before the board previously and is being brought back to the board, inclusive of direction that had been received from the board to staff. The board referenced in their discussion the policy from Peninsula Clean Energy as a starting point for crafting the Clean Energy Alliance Inclusive and Sustainable Workforce Policy. We had also received additional information for consideration from the Sierra Club and IBEW 569, which the board requested staff to review. In addition, the Clean Energy Alliance JPA agreement does include language in recital 6F that would be pertinent to an inclusive and sustainable workforce policy and was considered in development of this proposed policy. Changes to the Peninsula Clean Energy policy that was used as a starting point included adding language from the JPA agreement related to that the policy not be limiting fair and open competition. Language such as shall and will were changed to strive, and language such as require or required changed to encourage. We also removed language that specifically referred to project labor agreements. The proposed policy reflects the meeting requests and concerns expressed by the board, conformity with the JPA agreement, and suggestions from the Sierra Club and IBEW. And it was developed in concert with the General Counsel, Greg Stepanisic, who also has some additional, I think, background and information to share with the board. And that does conclude my presentation, so I will stop the share and bring it back to the board. Thank you, Chair Haviland. I think you're still on mute.
Apologize for that. Does our counsel, Mr. Stepanisic, want to say a few words before we go into board discussion?
Yeah, actually, I could add a couple items here that I would just suggest as two additional changes I discussed with Ms. Boswell this morning. And the one item would be on the Non-Discrimination Pledge. And I'd want to be careful there, not that we can't guarantee that some other supplier will not discriminate, but we do want to have a strong statement that they should not do so. And so the language I have added, would add here, would suggest adding would be, and this is on page 2 of the policy, it's under Non-Discrimination Pledge, that we would say CEA will not discriminate. And then we go on to say, and will require in its contracts with suppliers that they will not discriminate. So that makes it clear that we're going to require in all of our contracts with suppliers, so there'll be a non-discrimination clause. So I think that makes it a stronger statement against any discriminatory conduct by our suppliers. And the other item is just on page 3 in dealing with CA power purchase agreements with third parties. The second bullet point refers to particular licenses, and A, B, C10, C7, C46. I would suggest taking those particular licenses out, because there could be some other licenses that also would be appropriate on a given scope of work. So there, my recommendation would be just to say that employ properly licensed contractors and California certified electricians. They must be licensed, but we may not know for sure the particular license they may require down the road. So those would be the two suggestions I'd make as to add to the policy.
Thank you. And do we have questions from board members before we go to public comment? Yes, Board Member Schumacher.
Thank you very much. I just want to ask a couple questions. Is it legal to discriminate in the state of California?
No.
Thank you.
The one thing you want to do, though, just in contracts, so we always put in a non-discrimination clause, just so you can actually directly enforce it against the party that does, and you could terminate the contract. But absolutely, discrimination is not allowed.
Yeah. So in reading Public Contract Code 2500, in relation to PLAs, in your analysis, in the legal analysis, were the taxpayer protections within that code taken into consideration with our language when we're talking about fair and?
Yeah, they were. I think that those taxpayer protections follow anytime you do a PLA, but I think the language that was within our JPA agreement in the recital, and that's really more aspirational language. It's not a mandatory statement, but it is a policy, if you will, that's referred to of open and fair competition. It was meant to address any requirement that there be or a mandate as part of the JPA that there be PLAs as part of construction projects. So this was alternative language that was negotiated among the parties at the time the agreement was put into. And therefore, I think that with respect to a PLA, I do believe to be consistent with the intent of the recital that we should be really neutral at that point. In other words, PLA always could be considered on a case-by-case basis down the road. But I think we should be avoiding any suggestion that that is going to be a requirement or that a bidder gets a preference by having done, for example, PLAs in the past while another bidder did not. I think that runs contrary to the open and fair competition language of the recital.
Just to clarify, that aspirational language and in the recitals, that's not a policy, but that policies would be set by the board, and that was the intent of the JPA. And given I was a part of the negotiating parties,
that's actually absolutely a fair point, Board Member Schumacher. You're right. It's not a policy. It was just a recital aspiration, but not a policy. Okay, thank you for that. I do also want to just make sure that there's some understanding at the very least as we have this conversation that I think some of the heartburn around that I've heard around PLAs, some folks don't understand that there are actually taxpayer protections written into California law, which a PLA doesn't automatically equate to union labor. And I think that's sometimes what folks get kind of hung up on. And so I just wanted to confirm with legal counsel that a PLA does not automatically commit this agency to 100% union labor. A project labor agreement does, however, mean that we can absolutely, without a doubt, commit to local hire. So, it's interesting with project labor agreements. It comes down to how they're negotiated, and that's because that's why sometimes it's the term. You're right. Sometimes is maybe not fully understood, but as a practical matter, there, in my experience in cities I've worked with where they've been done, it does result in requirements for union labor, but that is a negotiated term as part of that agreement. So it wasn't that the agreement actually under state law mandated that there would be a mandate for union workers on the project, but oftentimes that is what is ultimately negotiated with the local unions as part of the PLA. Absolutely. I just want to make sure that where we can negotiate as a JPA isn't, the flexibility really isn't on staying neutral on that language, but there is still absolutely work to be done around negotiations, even if we have preferential language for PLAs in our policy. So I just wanted to make sure that given the complexity, and there's a lot of opinions around these types of things, that we at the very least have some common understanding about what we can and cannot do as far as flexibility with some of the language we're contemplating. So I don't have any questions, but I would have a comment toward the end after hearing from my board colleagues.
Yeah. Vice Chair Becker, do you have questions?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Kreider, do we have public comment on this item?
We received one public comment, and the member of the public did request that this comment be read into the record at the meeting. I would like to do that now. Dear Chair Schumacher and members of the board, on behalf of over 3,400 members of IBEW Local 569, we are pleased to see the CEA board taking up the process of developing agency policies. As we know, in looking at the work of many other CCAs around the state, the JPA is a framework. The policies help define the specifics of how the agency will deliver on the desired outcomes of the community, including realizing community benefits. Pertaining to item 6, the inclusive and sustainable workforce policy, we ask the board to reject the staff proposal. This is a weak, watered-down, very inadequate proposal that does not serve community goals. Thank you for your consideration. Gretchen Newsom, Political Director, Organizer, IBEW 569. That concludes the public comment for this item.
All right, moving on to board member comments.
I'm sorry, I did think of a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
And I guess this might be just for staff. I'm curious how many CCAs in California, so I guess there's about 20 of them, how many of them have a sustainable workforce policy? Does anybody know?
Thank you, Vice Chair Becker. I did, in crafting the policy, I did want to look at what other CCAs had in place, and I had put a survey out to our Cal CCA board group, did receive a couple of samples, looked online. It appears that many of the CCAs are in various stages of evaluating. I did receive copies of 3. That's not to say there aren't more out there, because it's very possible they're there. I just didn't get the response and I couldn't find them online. But I did also hear back from others that are in process of evaluating and wanting to see copies of anything that I had received back.
Okay. And so, yeah, because I tried to research it too, and I found like 3 online, and it's 2 of them we've already had here looked at. But do you have any idea whether or not any of those policies were enacted before launch of the CCA?
I don't have specific information with regards to timing as to when they were implemented. I didn't look at the date of the policy versus the date when they had launched their CCA programs.
Okay. But from your research, it seems like it's sort of trending now that more and more are kind of looking at those policies and trying to enact them.
Yes, I did hear from CCAs who have been actually in operational for several years and are now looking at implementing, as well as San Diego Community Power, who will be considering the same policy in the near future.
Okay, thank you for that. That was my
Board Member Schumacher.
I had a final comment, but did you have? I would really appreciate my colleagues allowing for this item to be contemplated a little bit more fully. We received some analysis from our legal counsel maybe a couple of hours ago around some of the recommendations that were being brought forward, really by the people who are going to be impacted by this, the workers. And I wanted to spend a little bit more time with this policy and the comments from the legal counsel. And so I would respectfully ask my colleagues to table this item until July 23rd. So we would just move the discussion and decision-making, any further discussion and decision-making on this to our July 23rd meeting. That would be a motion.
I can support that motion. This is a really important discussion to be had, and it's not time sensitive. And so if we want to have a little bit more time to make sure we're thoroughly evaluating it and having a robust discussion about it, I'm happy to support that. Any concerns, Vice Chair Becker, on moving this up a week?
I don't really have any concern. Does staff have any concern about moving this?
No.
Sure. Okay. And we have, I guess, bid it on the next meeting, right? Because.
Is that a second?
Short meeting? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, Ms. Creeder. Before we vote on this, I want to thank my colleagues about this, and hopefully I can round out with, I do think that we need stronger language instead of the strive and encourage language. So with that, thank you so much for allowing us to think about this a little bit further.
Board Member Schumacher?
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker?
Yes.
Chair Haviland? Motion passes unanimously.
Is that a 4-0 vote on that one with the dog?
I think so. Let the record reflect.
Oh.
Okay, thank you. Now on to item 7, our Clean Energy Alliance bid evaluation criteria and scoring system. So Ms. Boswell.
Thank you, Chair Haviland. One moment while I share my screen. Well, sorry for the delay here. Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
The item before the board for consideration is implementing a bid evaluation criteria and scoring system. The recommendation is for the board to review 2 alternative bid evaluation criteria and scoring systems, provide input, and select a preferred alternative that would then come back as a policy at a future date. At its May 7th, 2020 meeting, the board requested that this item be brought forward for consideration, and 2 alternatives were provided as samples to be considered by the board. They included the East Bay Community Energy bid evaluation policy, which provides bonus percentages and bonus points for achieving or meeting certain priority categories, and also one from Clean Power Alliance, which uses a high, medium, and low ranking system for certain priority categories. The East Bay Community Energy bid evaluation criteria provides bonus of 5% or 5 points out of a 100-point scoring system for responders who have offices located within Alameda County, which is the county in which East Bay Community Energy serves, and it has a minimum 25% employees from Alameda County. In addition, 2.5% or 2.5 points out of 100 can be earned for responses that use union and or unionized contractors. And then an additional 2.5% or 2.5 points out of 100 points can be earned from responses from businesses owned and operated by a person representing one or more women, minority, disabled, veteran, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender categories. With the Clean Power Alliance system, their high, medium, low ranking is evaluated on the following criteria, which includes the dollar value, an environmental stewardship category, which looks at whether the project demonstrates multiple benefits beyond climate and greenhouse gas reduction. It looks at workforce development and evaluates target hire, union labor, or multi-trade project labor agreements, and assigns a high, medium, or low ranking for meeting that. It also looks at development risk. So it's a composite rank based on factors impacting project risk, including whether or not the responder has site control, what the status of the interconnection is of the project, environmental screens, land use and permitting, project financing, and also developer experience in the project. They also evaluate project location and benefits to disadvantaged communities. So for each of these categories, they look at it and then assign each category either a high, medium, or low ranking, depending on the response. Again, in developing a bid evaluation and scoring system, we want to be mindful of our JPA agreement recital 6F, which indicates we want to have an emphasis on local jobs where appropriate, with that, and local generation of renewable power without limiting fair and open competition for projects or programs. And that is my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions that the board may have.
Thank you for that. Board member questions? No? Oh, yes. Vice Chair Beck.
Trying to unmute at that same time. So based on your experience, you had mentioned in there that the bonus point system does have a potential to drive up costs. Could you explain that?
Yes, if you have a solicitation and you are assigning bonus points to criteria over and above cost, then that could result in a project that has a higher cost getting a higher points assigned to it, which then could potentially result in an increased cost related to that project.
Okay, and So I guess this would be a question for Mr. Stepanisic. If we were to go with the other system, the high, medium, and low system, would we be able to reconcile the workforce development criteria with what our recital 6F says?
Well, I think it would come down to the precise language we ultimately adopt. I don't think in concept there's no conflict in concept with that approach. Would want to take it if you choose that approach. I'd want to take a little closer look at how we actually precisely word the actual criteria.
Okay, because we're not then deciding today on the actual criteria. Then we're just.
I thought we're deciding just, the approach.
Which way to go.
Which way to go. And then at that point, I would take a look at
a closer look at those.
Language. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Kreider, do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comment on this item.
Thank you. Okay, board member comments. Board member Schumacher.
Thank you. I grappled with this. Remember the last meeting we were discussing whether or not to go with a point system or whether to go with something more on the high, medium, low, or high, medium, neutral, low realm. And I have settled on preferring the more simple high, medium, neutral, low. I do think that in pursuing this, that I would like to see the item brought back before us for finalizing the language. And I don't think that it should be driven by the recital. I think it needs to be driven by the policies that we are crafting. And so it makes sense that we would put together the any policies, finalize those, which I think probably the inclusive and sustainable workforce policy on July 23rd would be the last one before we head into being able to plug in the language. But also as far as the project location, for instance, for the evaluation criteria, we will actually need to have a conversation around the PCC1 and the pro formas as we did earlier, because the rating of the project locations is actually contingent on our choice around which business plan to follow. So other than those two, I think, critical items, I do prefer the high, medium, neutral, low scoring system.
I didn't see neutral in there. Is that something that is necessary?
So under the Clean Power Alliance, if you go to the benefits to disadvantaged communities, for example, or to the environmental stewardship slide, yeah, they do have the neutrals in there.
Okay. Got it. I see it. Thank you. I'm for that system as well.
That's unanimous. It's simpler and it puts all the important criteria on the same footing, and I just think it's more clear. So I would support going with the Clean Power Alliance model for our JPA.
I'll second that.
All right.
Board Member Schumacher?
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker?
Yes.
Chair Haviland?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Chair Haviland?
Yes.
And for clarification on when it comes back, we would be bringing this back after the inclusive and sustainable workforce policy is adopted. And then we would incorporate that into the criteria to bring back.
Yes.
Okay.
Wanted to make sure that was, Ms. Becker, you were fine with that too? I think that makes sense.
Sure. As long as, yeah, I think that would be okay.
All right. As long as that's not an issue for staff, timing wise.
No, that's much easier, actually. It'd be good to get the inclusive and sustainable workforce policy totally tied down. Then we could tie that into the evaluation system. So that's from a staff point of view, it makes it much easier to get both these done together this way. But consider it separate meetings. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Schumacher, for that recommendation. So. Okay. Moving on to item 8, the Clean Energy Alliance administrative policies.
Thank you, Chair Haviland. And one moment while I prepare the presentation. Okay, the item before the board for consideration are the administrative and operational policy recommendations. And the recommendation is for the board to review and approve the Clean Energy Alliance Unsolicited Proposals, Non-Energy Procurement, and Financial Reserve policies. The first policy is related to the Unsolicited Proposals policy. Clean Energy Alliance currently does have a form on its website for interested parties to register for updates on future CEA solicitations. The Unsolicited Proposals policy takes this one step further and provides a venue for submission of proposals that are either not currently under solicitation or would not normally be the subject of a CEA solicitation process. In crafting the Unsolicited Proposals policy, staff did review similar policies and came up with a proposal that unsolicited proposals would meet the following criteria, including they must contain a novel, innovative, or otherwise meritorious concept, application, approach, or method, that it is for a good project, program, or service that would not normally be procured through CEA's typical solicitation processes, be independently originated and developed by the proposer, be prepared without CEA staff supervision or direct CEA staff assistant, and present the proposed work or project in sufficient detail to allow a determination to be made that the proposed project could enhance, benefit, and provide valuable input to meeting CEA goals. The policy proposes a two-phased approach. Phase 1 would be the submission of a conceptual proposal, which would be a written concept level proposal for staff to review to determine if the unsolicited proposal meets those criteria just mentioned. Assuming that the conceptual proposal does meet those requirements, then the second phase would be for the proposer to submit a detailed proposal that would include technical and financial information upon which to evaluate the proposal. Detailed proposals would be evaluated on the proposer's capabilities, related experience, facilities, techniques, or unique combination of these, which are integral factors for achieving the proposal objectives. Qualifications, capabilities, and experience of key personnel who are critical in achieving the proposal objectives. The proposer's financial capacity to deliver the goods or services defined in the proposal. The viability of the proposed schedule. The proposal's consistency with CEA's objectives and goals, and any other factors that may be appropriate for the particular proposal. The next policy for consideration is a non-energy procurement policy, and this would establish administrative procedures for procurement of goods and services, again, that are not energy procurements. The policy establishes solicitation thresholds as follows. It would require a request for proposal or request for qualifications for contracts that have a value that exceed $100,000 in any fiscal year, and these contracts would be subject to board approval before final execution. It would require an informal bid process for contracts valued between $50,000 and $99,999, and an informal verbal proposal for contracts valued between $10,000 and $49,999. For contracts or procurements less than $10,000, no formal or informal bids would be required, but staff would be directed to seek the best value available. The non-energy procurement policy also would establish signature authority. The chief executive officer would have the authority to signature authority for items up to $100,000, subject to general counsel approval as to form. And any new contracts executed in excess of $50,000 would be reported to the board at the next available board meeting. The CEO would also have approval for signing invoices and approving invoices and vendor payments for items that were included in the approved CEA budget. Lastly, is the financial reserve policy, and this policy was crafted based on prior board direction. It establishes the goals for the operating reserve of 5% of revenue contributed annually to the operating reserve, with an initial goal of accumulated 25% of revenue. And once that is achieved, for the board to strive to continue to contribute to the operating reserve to achieve a cumulative operating reserve of 40% of revenue. And that does conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer whatever questions the board may have.
Thank you for the presentation. So there's 3 different policies here. We could go through these one at a time. Start with questions on the Clean Energy Alliance Unsolicited Proposal policy. Any questions from board members on that proposed policy? Board Member Schumacher.
Thank you. Just one question. Whether or not, Ms. Boswell, I know that you've experienced some unsolicited proposals. Do you feel this policy is sufficient for your needs or for any future CEO's needs when it comes to unsolicited proposals?
I do. In looking at other unsolicited proposals, my goal was to have a way for proposals to come forward but not have significant amount of time or administrative impact. And having the 2-phase approach, I think, is a good balance for that.
Okay, I appreciate that very much, and I do hope that makes your job easier.
Okay, questions about the non-energy procurement policy? And any questions on the financial reserves policy? Okay, I didn't have any questions either. Ms. Kreider, do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comment on this item.
Thank you. Board member comment on the 3 policies. Board Member Schumacher.
Happy to support all 3 and appreciate the work.
Second.
Okay.
That was a motion.
A motion and a second. I also want to thank you for your work on this and in support of all 3 and the motion. So we're ready for a vote.
Board Member Schumacher.
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker.
Yes.
Chair Haviland.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you for that. The next agenda item, the last agenda item before we adjourn, is any board member requests for future agenda items. Comments on that? Yes, Vice Chair Becker.
I was wondering if we wanted to consider having 2 board members from each city while we're small. If we're just the 3 cities, it might make sense to look at the pros and cons of that. We might be able to have some subcommittees. We wouldn't be violating the Brown Act as many times at all if we had more. So I would like to explore that option, just the pros and cons of that.
All right, that's an interesting concept. It's definitely worth a discussion. I have a question for our attorney. How would that impact the Brown Act? Right now, we can only talk to our alternate. Would that change?
It would, because it would change the quorum of the board. So to go to that system, the board would have to amend its JPA agreement. But the way the JPA agreement is set up, the board itself can can make an amendment. So we're not required us to go back to each of the city councils. But it would make a difference for having subcommittees, because if you had 6 board members, then you could have a board subcommittee of 2 members, which you're not able to do at this present time.
And if we made a change like that, that would, of course, then apply to any future agencies that joined us, this 2-member.
So I've seen this done in a couple of different ways, and I've never seen this done.
I'm sorry. We're getting into the discussion on a non-agenda item. Thank you.
Yeah, so, good point.
Okay. So I think this is a valid point. I want to respect the request from Vice Chair Becker. And so I would just request, Ms. Boswell, that you take a look at our upcoming agendas and see when it would be appropriate to have a discussion on this topic.
Yes, one moment, I'll look. I actually do keep an agenda planning document, and I can take a quick look and tell you whether the next August meeting would.
Could we add, and I just want to make sure that I add, I don't want to do this if we have more cities join us. Obviously, I do not want to have 2 board members from each city, so I don't want that. So should I just say that we look into that issue as well, or?
I think that would be part of any discussion we would have about this. And maybe, Vice Chair Becker, we could leave it that you follow up individually with our legal, and if you're still interested in pursuing this, bring it up at our next meeting. But rather than make it a full-blown agenda item before you understand the ramifications of your request.
If that's how you want to do it, that's fine. But I think it's something that we should all discuss as well.
I'm happy to support whatever you want to do.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I don't know. Mr. Stefanisic, do you have, is that what you would like me to do, is to just speak with you privately, or should we put it on the agenda? We can discuss it all in open public meeting.
Well, yeah, it'd be important for everyone to discuss it. What I can do is I can provide the entire board just a brief memo that just would explain how this would work and how different agencies have handled this type of situation when you have a small membership versus larger membership. I can provide the whole board that background. And then at a subsequent meeting, you can decide then whether or not you would want to pursue further discussion of that. But that way, at least I can give you all the background information that you all would have then as to whether you want to talk about that further.
That sounds good. Thank you.
All right. And Board Member Schumacher, did you have any future agenda items?
No, thank you so much.
Okay. One thing I'd like for us to consider in the future, I don't know if it might be too much for the August meeting, but certainly soon after that, is as we have our meetings in different cities during COVID, we don't always have the same process for public comment because different cities don't do that the same way. And I'm just concerned that if this goes on for too long, and it looks like this may go on for quite a bit longer than we had all hoped, maybe September we have a board discussion on any new procedures that we want to implement for our virtual meetings during the COVID pandemic. I don't want it to be confusing to the public as to how they can participate in public comment at our board meetings.
Thank you. I'll add it to the September agenda.
Okay. Any other comments on this agenda item? All right. Our next meeting is a special meeting on July 23rd at 2 p.m. hosted by the City of Carlsbad. And we are done with our agenda for today, and our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.